Hello and welcome back. Today we're going to take a look at how to use the Nhibernate Burrow ASP.NET Session Management Library for Nhibernate. NHBurrow is a library which is part of the Nhibernate Contrib project, which aims at making session management in Nhibernate simpler and easier. In this episode, we're going to learn how to get up and running using Burrow and also using the Fluent Nhibernate configuration library. This is the Nhibernate Burrow webpage on fhforge.org. This is a library, again, that's open source. It's part of the Contrib project. And if you go to the website, you can poke around and you can see a bunch of different configuration options and more in-depth knowledge on Nhibernate Burrow that we're going to cover today. To get started, I have a simple ASP.NET MVC web application already created for us. Let's go ahead and run this real quick just to show that it works. As you can see, I get the out-of-the-box MVC homepage. So now what we want to do is actually include NHBurrow and Fluent Nhibernate and all that fun stuff. And we've already done that. No, we're not going to waste our time doing that here. So now that you've referenced the various libraries, how do you go ahead and get started? Well, the first thing we're going to do is we're going to really just quickly point out that I've already got my mappings for Nhibernate set up. We're not going to go over that in this episode. And I've also created my model here, which is a very simple model, which is the episode model. Now that we've got that set up, we need to first set up a hook for Fluent Nhibernate into Nhibernate Burrow. Typically with Nhibernate Burrow, if you're not using Fluent, it expects you to have the standard configuration files and the HBM files and all that fun stuff. We're not using that since we're using Fluent. What we want to do is I'm going to copy and paste in this class here, and we'll take a look at this, what it does. When I've created my class here, Fluent Configurator, and you'll see it inherits off of iConfigurator. iConfigurator is a Nhibernate configuration hook. And there's two methods I care about. Config, where it takes a couple of parameters, and config, where it takes a Burrow config. This Burrow config down here, you can just leave that as is. Don't worry about that. It's just a way that it does its persistence units for its workspaces. And if you want to learn more about workspaces, go ahead and read the wiki. This one up here is what is of importance. This is how you set up Fluent Nhibernate to be able to actually tell Nhibernate where everything's found. The first line here is I've created my connection to SQL Server. My connection string will be in my config file, and I've called it DB connection string. Then finally, I'm going to set up in Hibernate here, and I'm going to say fluently configure the database with my previous connection string. My mappings, you can find those in this assembly. And then finally, build my configuration. This is the hooks for Fluent Nhibernate to work. Don't really have to go over this too much. We'll have other diecast where we'll talk about Fluent Nhibernate. But I want to show you this is very, very important to get Burrow up and running when using Fluent. Now the next thing we need to do is we need to open up the web config. There's a couple things we have to do to the web config in order to get Burrow to work appropriately. The first thing we need to do is add in a section. That's this right here. And this is what tells Burrow what to do. Once we've done that, we want to go ahead and create our Nhibernate Burrow section that is expected. That is here. And the configurator we want to use is that Fluent configurator right here that we created a few minutes ago. So you got to make sure you have the full namespace here and the full assembly name here. And last but not least, I'm going to go ahead and add in my connection string. My DB connection string, I've got my database set up all here, I've got username, password set up, so I'm good to go. So now that I've got my web config set up, and I've set up my Fluent configurator, what do I need to do now? Well, I need to create some kind of way to get into Nhibernate and retrieve data. And I've done this, and I've created something called a episode facade. Let's go ahead and paste that in now. Episode facade is going to act as a service layer or a facade layer that my controllers will call into, and it'll do some work. And as you can see, I've got a simple method here that says fetch episodes, and it's got two lines of code. The first line gets my session. The second line will create a criteria and query the database. What's important here? This is my hook into Burrow. I don't need to worry about how it's creating the session or if the session's being created, if it's being joined, whatever the case may be. I just need to call burrow.framework.getSession. And now I have a session. Now one thing you need to pay attention to is I'm not doing session management here. Burrow's going to take care of that for me. I don't need to worry about closing it or disposing it or anything of that nature. So now that I've created my hooks to actually use Burrow and query the database via Hibernate, what's the next thing I need to do? Well, I need to go into my controller. I'm going to add a new action into my controller. And we're going to call this episodes listing. Episodes listing is a very simple action. It creates an instance of my facade, queries it, passes it back to a view. What's that view look like? It's just simple, strongly typed view. It's viewed off of my list of episodes. And it will essentially just dump data to the screen. This view is generated from the MVC template, so it's nothing special. I didn't do any modifications to it at all. So if I've wired everything up correctly, I should be able to get Burrow up and running. Let's go ahead and put a breakpoint right here. And before I do that, I do need to do one more thing. I need to add the link so we can actually launch and connect to the controller. And I've just added a new tab to the site.master so that I can add one to the top. So now that our page is loaded, let's go ahead and click on the listing link. Let it hit our breakpoint, hit F10. And you'll see that we get an exception that says either workspace is not initialized yet or is closed. Now why did we get that? Well, the reason we got that was the way in Hibernate Burrow works, it actually creates a custom HTTP module. And in that module is where it will start and stop your session. And so in order to get that to work appropriately, we need to add this line right here to the HTTP module section of your web config. Now doing that, I should be able to rerun this and have it work just right. Let's try that again. Let's F10, and I have a session. Let me go ahead and just F5 this now. And you'll see that I have some data dumped to the screen. What it dumps is truly less important than the fact that I was able to get Burrow up and running. So let's go back to our code real quick and let's take a real quick recap on what it is we had to do to get Nhibernate Burrow working with Fluent and Hibernate. First thing I need to do is create a class called Fluent Configurator, have it inherit off of my iConfigurator class. iConfigurator then needs to, in the config section, just set up Fluent and Hibernate and how it's going to create the connection to your database, where it's going to find the mappings, things of that nature. Once we've done that, we need to go to our web config and add a few different values. The first value we need to add is this section that will define our Nhibernate.Burrow section. That Nhibernate.Burrow section is right here, and it needs the full namespace and assembly name to the Fluent configurator that will be used for your for Nhibernate Burrow and Fluent Hibernate. We also need to go ahead and add our connection string because, well, we've got to connect to our database somehow. And the last, if you want to use the built-in module that Burrow provides, which is highly recommended, you need to add this line right here. Now, what happens in a scenario where I don't want to go through the web server? Let's say in a unit test scenario. How do I get Burrow to actually allow me to create a session? Because you remember, with the web config missing, it didn't work. But also, if I'm not going through IIS, it's not going to have a start and a stop. So I need to do something. To do that, all I have to do is do nhburrow, Burrow framework, init workspace, and then I can do Burrow framework.close workspace. And if I provide these in my unit test, both the start and the stop, I should be just fine, and it will be able to create and kill the session as appropriate. So I hope you learn how to set up Burrow now, and until next time.